Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Navigating Local Housing Strategies video series. For those who don't know me, my name is Cesar de la Vega, and I'm a senior policy analyst at ChangeLab Solutions, where I work primarily on the intersection of education policy and health justice, as well as healthy housing in neighborhoods and community engagement and capacity building. In this video, we will be discussing strategies to support housing quality and preservation of naturally occurring affordable housing, as well as some of the challenges and opportunities that go with that. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, this video is part of the ChangeLab Solutions Housing Solutions Collaborative. The collaborative is a year-long learning cohort that convenes cross-sector housing teams in 8 small to mid-sized cities across the United States. The primary goal of convening these teams is to confront the conditions that impede housing equity in their communities. Our hope is that these collaborations can generate idea and expertise sharing between housing experts and advocates in communities that otherwise might not have an opportunity to brainstorm together and learn from one another. In addition, the Housing Solutions Collaborative provides the teams with tailored technical assistance and a shared foundation for collective problem solving. Again, the topic of today's discussion, supporting housing quality and the preservation of naturally occurring affordable housing, are some of the most useful solutions that communities can use to ensure that all residents have access to safe, stable, and affordable housing. Decades of research have shown that safe, stable, and affordable housing sets the foundation for health. Housing located near good schools, high-quality jobs, healthy food, safe parks, and dependable transportation is essential for communities to prosper and thrive. Further, affordable housing leaves families and individuals with more money to spend on necessities such as healthcare and nutritious food, and can provide emotional and mental health benefits through greater stability and reduced stress. It's truly a building block for good health. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Kristen and Jonathan to the video series. Kristen and Jonathan, thank you so much for being here with us. We really appreciate your time. I'm excited for our audience to get to know you all and hear about the wonderful work that you all are doing. So I thought I'd get us started by asking you all to introduce yourself, your role, and tell us a little bit about the housing conditions in Tulsa and what you all are up to regarding the preservation of existing affordable housing and or ensuring housing quality across the Tulsa community.
Well, thank you for having us. It's certainly a pleasure to be with you all. I told Kristen when we were initially talking in preparation for this, my job primarily is to let her really steer the ship on this, as she's been doing incredible work. By way of introduction, my name is Jonathan Butler. I'm the Senior Vice President of Community Development for Partner Tulsa. When people ask what is Partner Tulsa, I think the easiest way to describe it is it's a combination of about 5 different quasi-city governmental entities that have merged into one to support its own institution as a public trust. In our portfolio in community development, we have both all of the community engagement type of activity that you would come to expect in cities and quasi-city entities. And then we also have affordable housing related functions in our Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which Kristen has been gracious enough to lead for us. I'll let Kristen then introduce herself, and then she can go into our first question, and then I might just piggyback on some of the things that she may say. Kristen?
Yes. Hello, my name is Kristen Mon, and I am the Director of Housing Initiatives at Partner Tulsa. So a little bit about my role is I work on our affordable housing strategy that we adopted back in December of 2019. And as Jonathan mentioned, on our Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which we launched and started accepting applications for in 2021. So to give you a context about housing in Tulsa, like everywhere, we definitely have experienced challenges when it comes to affordable housing, and that really predates the pandemic. Tulsa is a place that I think can be described as having a veneer of affordability. That when we talk about places being affordable, Tulsa is very affordable for people who have a certain level of income and certain financial resources. So there can definitely be a perception that this is an affordable place to live. And it sounds strange to say, what do you mean you have a housing crisis? What do you mean you have an affordability crisis? But it really predates the pandemic. In 2020, we learned that 46% of our renters were cost burdened and spent more than 30% of their income on housing costs. And we know that that number has been increasing as we've seen a 16% rental increase in the last calendar year and rental occupancy rates hovering at 95%. So we have an overall shortage of housing, rising rental rates, while overall incomes have remained stagnant. This has also led to a lot of challenges when it comes to accessing affordable housing resources. So we have, I believe as of April 2022, there were 3,600 households on our Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher waitlist. So we know that number has also increased. There's just a shortage of available landlords willing to accept those vouchers. So right now, our primary focus is creating more safe, quality, affordable housing opportunities to ensure stable housing for all Tulsans, regardless of income.
Yeah, I think if I just would add a couple of things to what Kristen has already eloquently pointed out. She mentioned that rise in the number of people who are on the wait list for the Housing Authority. When I last spoke to their development director, I think the total number of folks on the wait list for Section 8 vouchers rose all the way up to somewhere around 8,200 people. For a community of this size, that's an extraordinary number of people. By context, this is my third stint in government or something quasi-governmental. And if you count a judicial clerkship that I did as a first-year lawyer in the District of Columbia, then it would be my fourth. I've seen this work in different jurisdictions of different sizes, and I've seen it play out. When you have such extreme deficits in housing product and the availability of affordable housing opportunities, and you have all of these different challenges of trying to meet the needs of people where they are, we've got a huge housing shortage, period. And affordable housing and continuing to preserve affordable housing that is already naturally occurring in the ecosystem is incredibly complicated and really strange now when we know, as Kristen talked about, those rises in rental, in increase in populations who are renting. The inventory does not provide a whole lot of opportunities to continue to preserve naturally occurring affordable housing when landlords can get so much money for properties that are on the market. So I think from our perspective, particularly trying to approach the work within Partner Tulsa, figuring out sort of how do we grow the pot and how do we increase the number of units, both produced and then preserved, I think is important. I know as we get down into a couple more of the questions, we'll get into some of the interventions, I think, at some neighborhood levels that I'm excited to listen to Kristen kind of explain to people some of the work that we're attempting to do, particularly within the space of trying to ensure that we have policies that reflect priorities in limiting displacement, protecting people against evictions and whatnot. I think all of those that policy side of the house has to work in concert with the production side of the house to ensure that we have adequate opportunities for people, period.
Thank you both so much. That's so interesting. I think you all did a wonderful job of framing some of the challenges that you all are facing, right? This veneer of affordability. I think it's something that'll resonate with so many of our audience members, and the fact that these challenges predate the pandemic. I think a lot of folks are grappling with that and are thinking about how they might navigate some of these challenges, whether it's a shortage of housing, as you mentioned, or rising rental rates, the fact that income is remaining stagnant for so many folks. I think everybody is thinking about how can we still ensure stable housing for our residents as we grapple with all of these challenges that are hitting us at the same time. So I'd love to hear from you all how you are navigating some of these constraints or challenges that you have mentioned, And in doing that, if you could maybe point to some bright spots and or innovations that you're leaning into the work that you're doing. I think our audience would love to hear about how you're navigating some of these challenges.
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's interesting because when we talk about transitioning from pandemic, really one that's still underway, right? One of the things that, before I got into Tulsa, I was in San Antonio, Texas. And one of the results of working within the context of the pandemic was we did have a lot more protections that were in place by way of preventing evictions and having some moratorium on what was happening in that space, right? Kristen is very great at being able to talk about, we have one of the most landlord-friendly evictions policies and laws that in the nation here in Oklahoma. And so it's very easy and very quick to be able to evict people here in Oklahoma. That presents a myriad of different challenges as people begin to cycle through pipelines, right? If you have some evictions on your record, it's obviously much more difficult for you to then transition into some other type of housing, knowing that you've got an eviction on your record. And so those things become exacerbating problems. When you add the challenges with income, and when you add now the continuing challenge of inflation, you already have people who are squeezed, and you already have people who have limited disposable incomes. We have high rates in which people are cost burdened that Kristen gave us some statistics for, right? So we've got, I mentioned sort of the lack of product in some instances. We have aging product in other instances. We still have racial and economic segregation in our city. We have life expectancy rates that are some 11 years higher based on where you may live in our city. So all of those systemic challenges are still in play. All of the lack of access to affordable and quality housing, the lack of access in some instances to opportunity, and then, limited pathways to a degree for economic mobility, all challenges that are not unique to Tulsa. I know many of the folks who will tune into this are struggling with some of those same challenges throughout the nation. I'm looking forward, though, to not just sort of painting everything with sort of the negative and the doom and gloom scenarios. There are some positive interventions that I know we are adopting here and implementing in Tulsa. And I know folks across the country are doing the same types of things to try to ensure that we problem solve and we think about how we can move our communities forward and not just sort of lament on some of the negative things within community. The last thing I'll say before I turn it over to Kristen is this. I think Tulsa is very unique in the sense that we live at intersections of some of both the darkest times in racial tension and conflict in our country, but also some of the biggest successes in terms of some of the results of communities of color. We also live at intersections of native lands, of First People who really occupy significant place as their sovereign territories exist here in Oklahoma and in Tulsa in particular, right? And so these intersections provide both unique challenges and unique opportunities as we all wrestle with some of the challenges associated with income and limited income of policies that have adversely affected people of color, particularly within our criminal justice system. As we talk about things like race massacres and urban renewal practices, that is very much a part of the current tenor and tone and landscape and feeling of people in Tulsa. All of those things, I think, present unique challenges for us here in Tulsa. Kristen?
Yes, I really appreciate Jonathan highlighting the racial component, because something I love working at Partner Tulsa is the priority we place on racial equity in our work and really confronting the racial disparities that exist, particularly in housing. So when we talk about disparate impact, and I also appreciate Jonathan bringing up evictions, because that is one of the places where we absolutely see a disparate impact, that we know evictions occur at a higher rate in non-white majority neighborhoods than they do in white majority neighborhoods. We have the 11th highest eviction rate in the country, which is such a shocking thing to think about. And why Tulsa? And it really is, it is very fast and cheap to file an eviction and to remove a tenant. And you can remove them quickly. And tenants do lack significant protections. I think one of the most concerning one is we're one of few states that does not have an anti-retaliation law, which means if the tenant complains about an unsafe housing condition or reports them to code enforcement, or even requests a repair, a landlord can and does evict them. And when there is a shortage of housing and a lack of places to go, you have tenants willing to accept unsafe housing conditions, willing to even help landlords evade code enforcement, because the threat is, if you don't help me, if you tell anyone about this unsafe condition, then I will make you homeless. And again, we do know that that disparately impacts our BIPOC community. We know that BIPOC Tulsans account for nearly 45% of our population experiencing homelessness, but account for just under 29% of our overall population. So when we prioritize creating safe and quality housing, we know that we have to do that with a lens towards racial equity and to address that disparate impact. So I would say one of the bright spots in how we've done that really is the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. When we think about how we want to intervene, we're very conscious of the cycle of the cost burden renter. That it really does start with that cost burden, with that lack of available housing. Because when you're cost burdened, you are one financial hardship away from experiencing homelessness or housing instability. I used to call it the flat tire principle. My background before I came into this role is I practiced as an attorney. I worked with people experiencing housing instability. And I used to describe my clients as one flat tire away from a missed rent payment and homelessness. So inevitably that happens. The unexpected medical bill, the flat tire, you're late or miss the rental payment, and you can evict a tenant in 2 weeks from the day that rent payment is missed to the day a deputy is removing you from your home. That can take as little as 2 weeks in Tulsa, and it does. So now you're looking for somewhere else to go, but there isn't. As we just said, we were at 95% occupancy. And now it's even harder to access those housing opportunities because you have an eviction on your record, and a recent one at that. So you're forced to accept lower quality housing. You're forced to accept housing that, again, probably puts you back in that cost burden position. But now other opportunities for intergenerational wealth building and home ownership are just moving farther and farther and farther out of reach as you've entered back into that cycle. So when we think about the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, it's about intervening throughout that process. It's about creating loans that we use for development to increase those affordable housing opportunities so people have somewhere to go. It's about rental assistance programs that help intervene. I will say an example we've used with a rental assistance program, since we've talked about preservation of affordable housing. We partnered with the Global District, which is a Main Street program. They saw the purchase of a multifamily unit that was predominantly occupied by low-income tenants, many of whom were non-English speaking and were particularly vulnerable. So we were able to partner with them and give a rental assistance grant that was able to ensure they didn't experience homelessness because they could provide forward rental assistance. So first month's rent, security deposits, application fees, and address those barriers that they would be able to stay in their community and neighborhood and access other housing opportunities. So We also provide landlord incentives, addressing the perceived risk that landlords see with renting to someone who has a history of eviction through work with our landlord guarantee funds. And finally, when we address that housing stability, we focus on how we can move people out of this, out of homelessness and housing instability and into home ownership. And so when we think about our bright spots, I think one of our brightest spots has definitely been partnering with community-based organizations. And I think it's where we started to see a return on our focus on racial equity. So we have provided grants to 2 organizations that are doing work in North Tulsa and in predominantly Black neighborhoods in order to create opportunities for homebuyer education and financial assistance to help first-time home buyers purchase a home in North Tulsa. We just received our October report from the Be Well Community Development Corporation. Their program is called the North Tulsa Forward Program, and I need to give all credit for this work to Robin Daniels. What she has accomplished there has been truly amazing in bringing this idea into fruition for the North Tulsa Forward Program. And in the last quarter, 4 households were able to purchase their homes and become first-time home buyers with the support of that program. And all were Indigenous or people of color. 75% were Black households. So to me, that was really meaningful to be able to see that we were able to start moving the needle, not just in creating intergenerational wealth building, but addressing racial disparity. I say that because we know from our racial or from our equality indicators report that you're nearly twice as likely to own a home as a white Tulsan, as a Black Tulsan. So be able to see that our programs really are having the impact at creating intergenerational wealth building and housing stability while addressing those disparities, to me is just a shining bright spot.
I think one thing, Caesar, if I just add one additional comment, what Kristen has emphasized in her comments is I've done a lot of different types of work in which we might be looking at problem solving within an industry just simply based on that industry. I think it's very detrimental to think about problem solving that way. I remember working with some education-based organizations, and they were only looking to solve education problems with people who were education partners in the room without thinking about discrimination and racial segregation and lack of housing and lack of food quality for young people who might be matriculating through school, right? If you can't think about all of the connected tissue, all of the ways in which things connect that contribute to a problem, then you're not going to get very far in problem solving. So if we only focus on housing and we only think about housing, we don't think about how we can do neighborhood level investment, how infrastructure matters, how jobs particularly matters, access to transportation mechanisms and public transit and all of those types of things. All of those things to a degree have to work in concert to have the best outcomes for people. And I think some of the ways in which we are looking at problem solving, sure, we've got a lot of emphasis and a lot of need towards production. We know that. But we also have to figure out creative ways to hit on some of these other things that point towards thriving, functioning, healthier, more connected communities that also think about the place for forward thinking and innovation. One of the things we're attempting to do here in Tulsa is continue to attract and recruit more Black tech entrepreneurs to our city. The result of that is going to be sort of increases in people's wages, increases in small business development, all of these types of things that can help us close some of the gaps that we have in housing by first having a population that can create and prop up and ensure that we've got more diverse housing product out there. And then it connects to closing some of those loops in having some affordable units for people to be able to, transition nicely into. I mean, I just think that it's important to think about problem solving as the interconnected ways in which systems continue to operate, and think about change making from a holistic standpoint and not just singularly focus on housing.
Thank you for noting that about problem solving. I think that's music to the ears of our public health audience, who often thinks, not just about the downstream immediate challenge, but how can we move further upstream to address those things that lead to this eventual outcome or challenge down the line, right? So your interventions, your solutions are broad reaching and are coming in at so many different points that I think allow for you all to address these challenges in a more cohesive manner and also in a preventative manner, that allows you, that really sets you up for long-term success. So I love hearing about this approach. I love to hear the passion that comes out from you both when you talk about the work that you do and the bright spots. And I think, the way that you do the work requires that level of passion and commitment, because it is a long process. This isn't something that's solved in 6 months or a year. This is an ongoing journey. And so I'd love to hear from you all, in keeping that flame burning. What about this work excites you? What are you excited about looking ahead? What can we look forward to hearing about from the Tulsa community in the future?
I am very excited about the work we're doing on the Just Home project. So Tulsa was selected as one of 4 sites for this new national initiative that's been launched by the MacArthur Foundation and Urban Institute on how we break the cycle between housing instability and jail incarceration, while again addressing racial disparities that are prevalent in both. And I've been so grateful for the team we get to work with, that it really is a cross collaboration. We are working with Housing Solutions. We are working with Family and Children's Services and with the Terrence Crutcher Foundation. Each one of the partners brings a unique skill set to the table. But I think the other thing that makes this project and how we've approached it unique has been the heavy emphasis on community engagement and centering those with lived experience. I think that as we approach something as systemic as this cycle between housing instability and jail incarceration that crosses a number of disciplines, that instead of bringing the same housing people to the table and saying, okay, how do we want to approach this problem? We went to the people who are impacted. Something Shada Brown, Deputy Director at the Terrence Crutcher Foundation, said early on in the project: this isn't about creating trust with that community, it's about creating accountability. And I really love how she framed that. And I think that's something that makes me exciting about the work, because trust, we're asking them to give us something. Accountability, we're offering them something. It's a different framing. And as we've approached this project, the number one priority and outcome is we need more housing. What Jonathan and I have said from the beginning, what everyone has said, we need more housing. But what does that mean? What does that look like? And I think something that I've loved is that every step of this process, we've created the opportunity for input from those with lived experience. We've created opportunities for them to give feedback as we start designing what the actions will look like, but we've also created mechanisms for accountability. And we recently, I say we, but again, credit for this really goes to Housing Solutions and Bernita Smith, who is the lived experience coordinator and an individual lived experience herself. So we've ensured her, our ability to have her presence and her expertise on the team. But we created a lived experience advisory board. And when we develop the action plan of what we're going to do with the Just Home project, what will we do with those resources? We have people we go to and say, what do you think? What should this look like? Are we on the right track? What are we getting right? What are we getting wrong? And I think that that truly shows that as you approach the challenge of creating housing, And we hope to create transitional, supportive, and affordable housing through this project. That you can do this in collaboration with the community and with partners beyond just the usual suspects of the housing folks, that you can bring people from the community, people from social services, bring people from healthcare, and you're going to come up with a product. And our goal is a proof of concept that we can create housing that better serves the needs of our communities and addresses our community needs.
Yeah, I echo Kristen's sentiment with that. I'm excited about that. Again, this is new work, and it's innovative, and it is taking chances and taking risk and trying to figure things out. Like I think in so many spaces we aren't afforded opportunities to try things and see if it doesn't work. All right, if it doesn't work, let's try something else. Let's, all of these types of things. I think we get caught in cycles where, we're so outputs based, and not as outcomes based, to be able to focus on long-term solutions and problem solving, right? So I think what I love about the unique positioning of our organization is that we're nimble enough and still small enough to take risk and chances to do some new things. I think we're doing it centering community. We are attempting to be as community-based and community-led in processes as possible, with a myriad of different things that we're working on throughout the organization. We have a real unique opportunity to take 56 acres of publicly owned land and put it back in the hands of some community-based organization that is a benefactor from historic Greenwood, former Black Wall Street territory. I think that is extraordinary and significant, and it's exciting. I think working with people like Kristen every day, continues to, fuel my enthusiasm, not just for the work and not for the way that she thinks about people in problem solving, but really us. I mean, we had a conversation yesterday in which we're stretching both of our ways of leadership and service, and fine tuning and trying to work in ways in which we can be more efficient, trying to work in ways in which we can kind of elevate and focus more on our strengths. I think being in creative workforces and spaces like that provides a certain amount of opportunity. So I'm excited about that. Last thing I'll say is, I just think this is a really exciting time to be in Tulsa. As I mentioned previously, I've worked in a lot of different places in a lot of different cities with a lot of different populations, and Tulsa right now is on a growth trajectory. I think what we do right now will have a tremendous impact on the Tulsa we see in 10, 15, 20, and 50 years. To be a person who is, at the driving and riding in the front seat of that type of change and progress that can happen in a community, I think is really exciting. So great time to be in Tulsa. Honored to share space with you all to really kind of center in on that a little bit.
Yeah, well, no, thank you both. It's been such a joy and privilege for me to get to know your team over the past year and hear about the amazing work that you're doing. And I appreciate you both sharing your wisdom and sharing so many pieces of information that I think folks can take and reflect upon, and also think about how they can do similar things in their own community. So I think you left us all with amazing food for thought and inspiration. So before we sign off, I want to take a moment to thank you both, Kristen and Jonathan, for joining me today and participating in this video series. We again appreciate the time you took to share all of your know-how and experiences with other folks across the US who are also working on housing challenges. I should note for our audience that today's video is the third of three that we will be releasing in the coming weeks. So please, if you haven't already done so, we encourage folks to check out the other installments in which Change Lab Solutions staff hold discussions with other housing solutions collaborative partners about affordable housing production and housing stability. But again, once more, Kristen, Jonathan, I think the work that you all are doing in Tulsa is it's innovative, it's inspirational, it's revolutionary. I think I agree. It's an amazing and exciting time to be in Tulsa, and I'm looking forward to hearing much more about the wonderful work that you all do in the years ahead. So thank you all both for spending some time with us. And once more for folks, for our audience, thank you for joining us today. Again, my name is Cesar de la Vega from Change Lab Solutions. We appreciate you spending some time with us, and we'll see you next time. Take care.